So this is continuing a critique of Tom Jump's epistemology, and I'm going to continue the video, not exactly where I left off last time, but this is more of Tom Jump speaking on his understanding of epistemology and how he seeks to justify his beliefs.
Well, I mean, I tried to demonstrate it's not, because no matter how you change the ontology, I still get the same results.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Tell me how you can change the ontology and get a different result other than I
Well,
think.
what I'm saying, well, if you don't, that's why I'm asking, what does it mean to exist? Because if you don't know existence and you don't know what differentiates you from everything else, again, I can't even say that because you don't even know if man is purely materialist. I think I've heard in a context in which it seemed as though you did hold to that position. And it seemed as though you were defending the coherency of a purely materialistic ontology of a human being. So I might have misinterpreted that, but it seemed as though you took a position there, which would help me so that I can kind of ask some questions. But now it seems as though you're an agnostic in regards to what you think the nature of man is.
Well, no, I definitely take the best explanation, I think, of materialism, but that's not my argument here. My argument here is just that
I know that's not your argument, Tom. That's not your argument, but the answer to that question will help me understand your argument better. But since you're now not taking
no, it's not related to my argument. It has nothing to do with my argument.
it would be related to my critique of your position.
Well, that's the point. If you're critiquing that, then you're not critiquing my argument. It's a straw man. So
Well,
again,
I'm not straw manning you because I'm not saying that is your argument. I'm saying that's a helpful piece of information that would help me respond to the point that you're making. But since you do not hold to a position in regards to that, you don't hold to a position in regards to ontology. I have insufficient information for me to actually press you on anything. Because you can press me on something and be like, well, I don't have a position on that. And then you can bring something else up and I go, well, I don't have a position on that. My position's over here. And so there's not enough information to actually push this forward.
well, remember, your objection was that I can't get intelligibility. And I said, yes, I can. Here's how I do it. I start with I think, therefore I am. There's some difference between my imagination and my experience. And that gets us intelligibility. Now,
So we've already dealt with the I think, therefore I am, and now he also uses the fact that, or what he believes to be the fact that he can differentiate between his experience and his imagination. But the problem is he can't even demonstrate that with his own worldview, his atheistic worldview, because he's limited. He's operating on limited and finite consciousness that doesn't have revelation from omniscience. He has a limited amount of information, and therefore there could be something he's not aware of that could invalidate everything he thinks he knows, and so he has no way to justify his belief in imagination existing or experience existing. For experience to exist, there must be an experiencer, and for all we know, if we're operating according to a worldview in which there's no revelation from omniscience to tell us what's true, we're stuck with our finite mind, and for all we know, the nature of reality is just colors and shapes and the things we call concepts just floating around, independent of each other, just in the ether. And we have no way to prove that there's actually an experiencer, someone to experience these things. They just might exist with no mind to experience them. Just like a forest exists without even if there wasn't any mind in the forest to experience it, the forest could just exist. And that could be the nature of reality. There might not be any minds, there just might be a bunch of physical objects, and maybe the things that we think are concepts and the things that we think are abstract, maybe those are actually a type of physical object. Maybe those are types of physical objects, and maybe the thing that Tom thinks is his imagination is also the same thing as the experience. He talks about how he can imagine a unicorn and how that's different than seeing a unicorn flesh and blood in front of you, and so he uses that distinction to try to come to conclusions about reality. But both of those could just be projections of a consciousness, and they could be the same type of thing. And just like what happens when you dream. In a dream, you might be dreaming about a unicorn, and you might think it's flesh and blood in front of you, and you might also be thinking in your mind conceptual thoughts in your dream about unicorns, and those could both exist in the same type of dream state in which nothing physical is happening, but it's all mental and conceptual. Well, how do we know that the nature of reality has any physical in it, and that there's any difference between imagination and this experience he has, like in terms of the ontology? Since he has no ontology that he's promoting, that he seeks to justify, they could be the same type of thing. You can't really differentiate them, because they could be the same thing, just two different parts of the same thing, because things in reality can have parts that look different from one another. Like a horse has a tail that looks different than its leg. Those are different parts of the horse, and the tail is still part of the horse, even though the tail looks different than other parts of the horse. And so the imagination that Tom has could be just a part of the whole of the imagination and experience that are just the one thing. And maybe that's just one thing, and maybe why differentiate them if you're rejecting ontology, and it could be in the nature of reality just the same thing. Like, we can't understand what you're talking about, Tom, when you talk about imagination and experience as two different things, because they could be the same thing. Like, there might be a unicorn you've never seen, and that imagination you have about the unicorn you've never seen is actually, it could be, for all you know, part of the unicorn that exists flesh and blood. And maybe the imagination you have is part of the flesh and blood of the unicorn that you haven't seen yet in flesh and blood, in the way that you think flesh and blood exists. You have to, if there's no ontology posited in his worldview that can be justified, you can't make sense of what he's saying when he says imagination and experience, because the imagination could be the same thing as experience. And the fact that they seem to appear different doesn't mean they're different things, because one thing can have two different parts that look differently, that appear differently. And he can't even demonstrate that appearance exists, because if he's rejecting ontology, then there's no way to demonstrate that there's something appearing to another thing. Like I said before, there could just be brute facts, and the nature of reality could just be, for all we know, with our finite limited consciousness, without revelation from God, for all we know, the nature of reality could be shapes and colors, and these things we call concepts just existing. And maybe the concepts aren't even concepts, maybe they're just physical, but we can't even understand what the word concept means if we don't posit an ontology to differentiate it from the physical as a non-physical thing. You can't, since Tom cannot demonstrate that the experience and the imagination are not two parts of one whole, he cannot communicate effectively to people when he says that he can use the difference between imagination and experience to come to correct conclusions about reality, because he doesn't know if they're two different things or if they're two parts of one whole. And that's a problem. You can't communicate effectively if you don't have any way to justify on an ontology, a certain way of being for the things that you're talking about.
And none of that has to do with ontology. Like, I didn't say anything about ontology there because I didn't need it. Like, that's all I need to get intelligibility is I think, therefore I am. There's some difference between my imagination and my experience. So now, just with my epistemology, I have intelligibility. I've gotten it. We're good. So why are you looking for more?
Because unless reality is a certain way, I'm having.
No, you haven't gotten it. You're not good. Because intelligibility requires a mind. If all of reality, if the nature of being for all of reality is physical, that's not intelligibility. And if you want to redefine intelligibility to be physical things, then people don't know what you're talking about. And if that's the special language you want to create, maybe you want to create a community of people who use that language of intelligibility to refer to physical objects doing things. Well, you still are stuck with any time that you're talking about it, you don't know if the thing you're referring to is actually physical, and you'd have to be positing a certain nature of it to even for people to even make sense of it. You can't make sense of the word intelligibility. You can't use the word intelligibility to communicate with anybody if the word intelligibility doesn't have an ontological meaning, if it doesn't communicate the ontology, the nature of being of a certain thing. Intelligibility requires concepts and thinking and minds and the non-physical realm. But if intelligibility is just what physical objects do, because maybe the nature of reality is just all physical, if intelligibility is just physical objects doing things, then you can't communicate with people. Nobody knows what's being talked about when you say intelligibility, because it could be physical things happening, it could be minds doing things. It's just this thing, and you haven't defined the thing, and it's just thing. Okay, well, that doesn't get us anywhere. If you're not going to define the thing ontologically, when you say intelligibility, when you can say I have intelligibility, all you're saying is I have a thing. Well, congratulations. That's stupid. Like that means nothing to us. We want to know how you get intelligibility, which is how you can know things, which is concerned with beliefs and the world of the conceptual. That's what people are talking about when they say intelligibility. They're not talking about physical objects coming into existence, going out of existence, moving around, doing things, because for all Tom knows, the things he thinks are conceptual and thoughts, or defines as conceptual as thoughts, they're just physical objects. And so people don't know what you're talking about when you say intelligibility, if reality could all be physical. You've just destroyed the term intelligibility.
Insufficient information for me to actually press you on anything, because if you can press me on something and be like, well, I don't have a position on that, and then you can bring something else up and I go, well, I don't have a position on that, my position's over here, and so there's not enough information to actually push this forward.
Well, remember, your objection was that I can't get intelligibility, and I said, yes, I can. Here's how I do it. I start with I think, therefore I am. There's some difference between my imagination and my experience, and that gets us intelligibility. Now, none of that has to do with ontology. Like, I didn't say anything about ontology there because I didn't need it. Like, that's all I need to get intelligibility is I think, therefore I am. There's some difference between my imagination and my experience. So now, just with my epistemology, I have intelligibility. I've gotten it. We're good. So why are you looking for more?
Because unless reality is a certain way, I'm having difficulty, Tom, and I apologize, seeing how you can disconnect. And I know the difference between ontology and epistemology, but I'm having difficulty how you can talk coherently about the one while rejecting the other, or maybe not rejecting it, but not seeing how they're intricately related.
Right. So remember, if I said I appear to be holding a cup, that statement is true even if I'm in the matrix and the cup doesn't exist. If I said I appear to be holding a cup, that statement is true even if I'm a Boltzmann brain and just created 5 seconds ago. If I said I appear to be holding a cup, that statement is true if we're in a theistic universe with a god. If I said I appear to be holding a cup, that statement is true if we're in a pantheistic universe. So all those things I just described are different ontologies. It could be theism, pantheism, Boltzmann brain, the matrix. But no matter how you change the ontology, the epistemology, the I appear to be holding the cup, is true independent of the ontology. It doesn't matter how you change the ontology.
And you just made an unintelligible statement because we don't know what the I is. Why do you keep using the word I, Tom, when you've already stated that the I could just be thinking? Well, you keep using the singular pronoun that actually means something in the English language, and we don't know what you're talking about when you say I. Could be holding a cup. Well, he's actually saying, I appear to be holding a cup. And as I've said before, Tom can't demonstrate that appearance exists. Appearance requires one thing communicating to another thing, one thing appearing to another thing, and something's receiving information and receiving an appearance. But for all Tom knows in his worldview of limited consciousness, everything could be just brute facts, and there's no experiencer, there's no mind to experience anything. It could just be shapes and colors and these things called concepts just floating around, just existing with no perceivers, no experiencers. So he can't even use the word appear, but he uses the word appear. He can't use the word I, he can't use the word appear, and yet he says, I appear to be holding a coffee cup, and that works for any ontology. No, not if you don't know what I is ontologically, not if you don't know what appear means ontologically. It's just, what does appear mean? We don't know what it means to appear. Is it just whatever your subjective consciousness comes up with? Well, we don't understand what that means. You can't use language with this worldview. Also, the appear to be holding a coffee cup, like, who appears to who? Like, if the nature of reality is that there's tons of different little consciousnesses that have in them just tiny pieces of information, not much information, and that's all they have in them for as long as they exist, they could create this mosaic of what is perceived to be reality. And what's appearing is not the coffee cup in reality. It would just be these little pieces of information. It could be appearances happening in little minds that only have a very limited amount of information, and what's appearing to them is a part of the coffee cup, a part of the hand that's holding the coffee cup, and then another consciousness has another part of the hand or another part of the coffee cup, and all of these little consciousnesses could create this mosaic of a picture of a hand holding a coffee cup, and none of that would be in one mind. It would all be a hive mind. It would be multiple consciousnesses creating this tapestry, but no one given consciousness would be perceiving the tapestry. So no given consciousness, we would not be able to tell that any given consciousness is perceiving the coffee cup. So he can't even claim that it appears to me that I'm holding a coffee cup, because he can't even demonstrate that any given consciousness exists that is perceiving a whole coffee cup or a hand holding something. It would just be a piece of the coffee cup existing in the consciousness, and the consciousness wouldn't know that is part of a coffee cup. All the consciousness would see is just this color. All the consciousness would see is just, the color of the hand, if that consciousness is contributing that part to the mosaic that we think is existing in one consciousness. So no, Tom, you can't claim this. This is like low IQ reasoning that he's got.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So when you say that you could be in the Matrix, how does that proposition, could be in the Matrix, how does that not put you in a form of skepticism about a lot of things other than what things appear to you?
Well, remember, your question was, how do I separate the epistemology and the ontology, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the ontology is what nature is. You said you're familiar with the distinction. So ontology is the way things are, like what it is to be case. So if we're in the Matrix, that's ontology. It happens to be the ontology of us being in the Matrix, or us being a Boltzmann brain, or being a theistic universe. Those are all ontologies. Now the epistemology.
Can you repeat that again? Ontology is, and then you gave an example of the Matrix and how things are, right?
Right. So ontology is the study of what exists. So if we're in the matrix and the matrix exists and we exist in the matrix, that's all ontology. That's an ontology. It's the way the world is. And if we exist as a Boltzmann brain, that's an ontology. Or if we exist in a theistic universe, that's an ontology. Now, the I appear to be holding the cup, that's true no matter how you change the ontology. You can change the ontology in any way you want. Boltzmann brain, matrix, theistic universe, pantheistic universe, throw out ontologies, all you want will never change that statement. That statement is going to be true independent of the ontology.
All right.
That's
Okay.
how I separate the two apart, because I can say, no matter how you change the ontology, this statement's still going to be true no matter what.
Yeah. All right. So that interests me then. Okay. So I think I understand.
No, the statement, I think, therefore I am, can't be true, because the statement requires ontology due to words having meaning. If you believe that words have meaning, then they mean an ontology when you say them. Like think means a conceptual thing. It's a non-physical thing. It's thought-based. It's what happens in a mind outside of physical forces like a brain. That's what thoughts are. That's what thinking involves. But if we don't know the true nature of reality in an atheistic worldview, in which we're operating with limited amount of information and no revelation from God, for all we know, thinking doesn't exist, and it's just objects that we think are concepts just appearing and happening and doing things. Like, and every experience you have is just a combination of physical objects doing things. Maybe that's the nature of reality. There's no way to know. So it could be that, or it could be concepts that we think of normally, our normal understanding of concepts when we think of concepts as non-physical things. It could be that when you say thinking. So which one is it? We can't know when he says, I think. So we don't even know what that word means. So we don't even know what the sentence means. I think, therefore I am. And the I, we can't demonstrate that the I is a singular thing, and he understands that and says that we can just call the thinking I, and that the I can just refer to the thinking. Well, I actually means something. I is a singular pronoun. It refers to one thing and not a plurality. So if Tom doesn't want to be able to use language correctly, this is the route he's going to go. Like, he can't use language with this epistemology, and you can't communicate anything with this epistemology, and you can't know the nature of reality. You can't know things. You can't justify beliefs if you can't even prove that beliefs exist, because beliefs have an ontology. They have a certain, belief means something, and belief is required for knowledge, as I've demonstrated before. This is just highly absurd. So that's my critique of Tom Jump's epistemology. It's pretty whack, and you can't use language in his worldview. Nobody knows what you're talking about, because any word that you say could mean basically anything. So as he talks, he's speaking nonsense, and he's not being consistent, because if he was consistent, he would realize that, oh, the things I'm saying could mean whatever a person decides they mean, and they could mean anything. It could be, belief could be anything. Belief could be physical objects. We don't know what it is. So my sentences are unintelligible, but I'll just claim that I have intelligibility. It's just totally stupid. So stop. If you've been influenced by this guy, like, stop being influenced by this stupid reasoning.